This is lesson 19, part 2, and we'll be continuing our work on ties. Remember that the first step in achieving music literacy is just to understand the concepts. The second step then is going to be to get our body to be able to realize some of these concepts. If we want to develop ease and efficiency, though, we're going to need to practice. So in thinking of establishing a practice routine, I want to encourage you to aim low for duration, high for frequency. As much as you can, make it a daily non-negotiable habit. Usually 6 out of 7 days works best. And it's something like brushing your teeth, ideally at the same time every day. Remember that many of the same skills we would use with a small child when teaching them a new difficult concept are going to also be the skills that work well when we're trying to teach our own bodies and minds this new and complex and difficult skill of music reading. So we want to be calm, we want to be patient, we want to be willing to break problems down into the smallest parts needed and the lowest level needed to achieve some success, and then build on that. We want to break problems down to individual difficulties, isolate those difficulties, and then try piecing them together again. We want to encourage and allow plenty of repetition to develop ease. So it's not just enough to get it right, but we want to do that over and over and over then to be able to build fluency and ease. Remember that beat is a recurring, predictable pulse, and it is independent of anything else going on around it. Rhythm is when we start and stop notes or sounds, and when we start and stop rests or silences. Rhythm is dependent on a pulse to be fully realized. A review of our Gordon rhythm syllables that we'll be using to vocalize the rhythms that we're going to be speaking and reading. So do is a 1-beat note. We can also use that same syllable for multi-beat notes just by holding it longer. So do would be a 3-beat note. Do day, we're going to pair those together, will represent our half-beat notes. So do day, each syllable is worth half a beat, not half notes, but half beat notes. So literally 1/2. It could be an 8th note, it could be a 16th note. We just don't know until we've designated a beat or pulse note. Our quarter beat notes we will generally group into 4s, where each syllable will represent 1/4 beat. So do, ta, day, ta. Each syllable is worth just 1/4 of a beat. Just to warm up with some beat and simple rhythm exercises, we're going to set our metronome at 80. I'm hearing the beats are being grouped into 4s. And we're just going to go ahead and clap the beat or put that beat into your foot if that's easier. So 1, 2, ready, clap. And now we're going to speak 8 1-beat notes. 1, 2, ready, speak. Do, 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 do. Do that one more time. Ready, go. Do, 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 do. Keeping the metronome at 80 and continuing to use 1-beat notes. We're going to do a 1-beat note followed by a 1-beat rest. And I want you to either whisper or mouth or internally say that silent do so we keep track of that pulse at all times. We're going to do 4 sets of the 1-beat note followed by a 1-beat rest. Here's our metronome. 1, 2, ready, clap. So we're just finding this beat. Now 1, 2, ready, speak. Do, 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 do. Do that again. Ready, go. Do, 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 do. The truly important thing in all of this music literacy stuff when we're talking about rhythm and pulse is that you're able to maintain a pulse while putting a rhythm on top of that. If it helps you to mouth the syllables that we're not actually doing something on. So if it helps you to go do, then do that. If that's like mind-boggling, confusing, do your best to at least internally feel that pulse. Even if you don't actually say a word or think a word on that, we want to make sure we're feeling that heartbeat of the music at all times, that we don't just overlook rests or forget that the beat continues. So we want to be feeling, and it really is an internal thing. When you see a whole audience of people bobbing to music, that's it. That's the pulse. That's what we're going for. Make sure you don't lose sight of that. If it helps you to tap your foot, if it helps you to clap, doesn't really matter, but you have to be able to keep track of the pulse, even while you are either saying or singing or playing rhythm. That's what's really critical when we're learning to read music and want to play together. Lowering the metronome to 60 now, we're going to say a stream of half beat notes. So do days. We're going to clap the pulse first. 1, 2, ready, clap. 1, 2, ready, speak. Do day, 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 do day. One more time. Ready, go. Do day, 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 do day. We're now going to say a pair of do days followed by one beat of rest. And during that rest, we're going to either silently feel or whisper or mouth the silent do day. Remember that do day is really 2 half beat notes together. They obviously add up to 1 beat. So instead of just thinking 1 silent beat, we're actually just going to keep that pulse going. Do day, do day. Okay? We're going to do the pair of spoken do days and then the pair of rested do days. And we're going to do that pattern 4 times. 2, ready, clap. 1, 2, ready, speak. Do day, do day, do day, do day. I'm going to do that again. 2, ready, go. Do day, do day, do day, do day. Returning to J. Althouse's Ready to Read Music. We're on Unit 2, the Rhythm Unit, Lesson 8, Ties. We learned that we can add a dot to a note or rest value to increase its length or duration. And during the last video, we also learned about this concept of tying notes together. So notes that are on the same line or in the same space can be tied across a bar line in order to create a longer note value that would otherwise be impossible because we would exceed the total number of beats allowed in that measure. So we're going to continue where we left off here. Music math. To figure out the value of 2 tied notes, add the value of both notes. So let's just create a scenario here. Let's call a quarter note or a quarter rest our 1 beat note, our pulse note. So our half notes would be 2 beats, and our whole notes and whole rests would receive 4 beats in this scenario, and eighth notes and eighth rests would receive half a beat. So it says to figure out the value of 2 tied notes, add the value of both notes. So if we tie 1 quarter note to another quarter note, its total value is 2 beats. So basically we just don't restate this note, we continue to hold it. So instead of saying do, we would just say do and hold it just like we do for a single half note. Okay, looking at the next tied note here, we have a half note plus another half note, so their total value is 4. It's similar, just like a whole note would be held for do for full beats, we would do the exact same thing here. Just continue to hold that and do not restate this note. We just continue to hold it. The quarter note here is worth 1 beat. The eighth note is worth half a beat. So if we tie those together, it's worth the same as a dotted quarter. Now, why is that? Well, because the quarter note itself receives 1 beat. Remember, a dot is worth half of whatever note it's dotting, so half a beat. So altogether, 1.5 beats. There are only 2 pairs of notes in this example which can be tied. Add ties to those 2 pairs of notes. Okay, so remember that in order to tie notes, they have to be on the same line or on the same space. And they do have to be consecutive notes, so one right after another. So let's take a look here. Well, these are different lines in different spaces. Here's one on line 2, and here's another on line 2. So actually that could be tied. Remember that the tie will go in the opposite direction of the stems. So if the stems are going up and on the right, we're going to want to tie like that. Okay, then we have a different space, a different line, a different space. We have now line 4 and line 4. Well, that's fine as well. And it's over a bar line, which is great. So we're going to make sure our tie goes in the opposite direction of the stems. There's only one stem here going down and on the left, so we're going to make sure our tie goes on top like this. Music math, write the note or dotted note that equals the tied notes. Okay, so we're going to, again, just use this made-up scenario of quarter note equaling 1 beat just to make the math a little bit easier to figure out. So a dotted half note tied to a quarter note. Well, a half note's worth 2 in this scenario. The dot's worth half of the half note, so this is going to be worth 1, so it adds another 1 beat, and then the quarter note will be 1. So altogether that adds up to 4 beats. Which of our note values are worth 4 beats? Well, that would be a whole note. So we're just going to write that there. All right, and then looking at number 2, we have a quarter note worth 1 beat. The dot that's dotting that quarter note is worth half of a quarter note, so it'll be worth half a beat. And then an eighth note is also worth half a beat in this scenario we set up. So that's a total of 2 beats. If we look at the note value pyramid we created, we would recognize that a half note will be equivalent to that. Looking at number 3, an eighth note, half a beat, plus another eighth note, half a beat, total of 1 beat. A 1 beat note in this scenario is a quarter note. Looking at number 4, a quarter note worth 1 beat, a half note worth 2 beats for a total of 3 beats. Okay, let's see here. Well, there's no note worth 3 beats on the note and rest value pyramids, but we know we can create one that goes in between here. So let's start with a half note, and then we can increase its value with a dot. So we know that this half note is worth 2 beats. The dot is worth half of the half note, so another 1 beat, so a total of 3 beats. Add the correct note or dotted note to the tied note. Okay, so we're going the opposite way. So we have 2 beats over here, a half note, and it needs to equal the other side. So we have 1 beat for the quarter plus half a beat for the dot, because the dot is worth half of whatever note it's dotting. So what are we missing here? We need another half beat. So I'm going to tie that to an eighth note. Number 2, another half note. We need it to equal this side. So we have 1 beat for a quarter note. Well, I need another 1 beat note here. So I'm going to tie it to another quarter note. 1 beat over here for number 3 has to equal an eighth note, which is a half beat note, plus, well, another half beat would do it. So let's tie them to another eighth note. And then we have a whole note worth 4 beats equal to 1 beat plus, well, I need a note that's worth 3 beats. So again, we're going to use a half note, but we're going to dot it to add that extra bit of value. So this half note is worth 2, and its dot is worth half of that value, 1. So altogether, it equals 3.